This week on Let's Talk About Mental Health, I'm talking about balance, why finding balance is so important for your mental health and well-being, and how to make it happen. So let's get talking. This is Let's Talk About Mental Health, a weekly podcast about mental health and well-being, hosted by Jeremy Godwin. Let's talk about mental health, because the more we talk about it, the easier it gets. Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Let's Talk About Mental Health, the weekly podcast full of practical advice for improving and maintaining good mental health and well-being. I'm Jeremy Godwin. Thank you very much for joining me. This week's episode is Let's Talk About Balance. I'll be talking about how finding balance in all areas of your life can serve to improve and maintain your mental health and well-being, and I'll be discussing how to work through the struggles often associated with giving up things that throw us out of balance. So, let's talk. Light and dark, night and day, hot and cold. Balance is present in all aspects of nature, and as humans we tend to live lives that can often be at odds with the natural balance of life. The notion of balance is about making sensible decisions that are in your own best interests and approaching everything with a sense of moderation. Now, nobody is saying that you need to go run off and join a monastery or a nunnery and live a life of frugality unless that's what feels right to you. But at the other extreme, a life of excess is not healthy for your physical or mental health in the long run. If you live a life that is out of balance, eventually it will catch up with you. You will burn out or make more and more mistakes that cause issues for yourself and for people around you, or you will cause damage to your physical and mental health. It might take weeks or months or years, but eventually it will affect your long-term health and happiness, which is why it's important to know if you're out of balance so that you can then do something about it. How do you know if you're out of balance? Let's be blunt here. If you're self-aware and completely honest with yourself, you probably know if you're out of balance. At the more extreme end, there's the really out-of-control type of behavior where, if you spend 3 or 4 nights or more a week ingesting substances that could take down an elephant, you're probably a bit out of balance, and that's probably an understatement. There's other really big and obvious signs. If you wake up in a hospital because you went too far on a night out, if you lose your job because of excessive behavior affecting your work, if you lose friends or family members over your behavior, or end up in jail because of your actions, those are pretty major warning signs that your life is out of balance. Often, however, it's the smaller, more everyday actions which can add up over time to throw our lives out of balance. Think about your work. Are you working 60, 70, 80 hours per week at your job? I mean, that's great if that's what floats your boat, but I have to tell you that your job is just a job, and it shouldn't take up so much of your life, because it's not going to matter in the long run, and you need to put your own needs first, your own health and your work-life balance, because nobody else is going to do it for you. Other examples: do you ever wake up in the morning after the night before and cringe when you recall your behavior? Or maybe you had such a big night that you can't remember parts of it or any of it at all. Or you might spend the entire day trying to recover because you've got the hangover from hell, or once you hit your 30s and 40s or 50s, a few days. I hate to be the boring voice of logic and reason here, but wiping yourself out isn't a sign of healthy balance in your life, and it's not good for your mental health and well-being. I mean, if you'd have told me a couple of years ago that I'd be sitting here advocating a life without getting yourself wasted, I probably would have laughed at you while I was downing another glass of Prosecco. But since getting sober in July 2018, I've had to learn to think differently about what it means to live a truly balanced life. Let me just pick up on that sobriety thing for a moment, and this whole podcast is not going to turn into a lecture about sobriety, I promise you that now. And let me just say that sobriety has been my choice, and it's a choice that I had to make because I'm no good with moderation. So I am not saying that you have to give up drinking to find balance, because everybody is different. However, let me say that if you are one of those people who can't do moderation and then stick to it, then you probably do need to take a long, hard look at whether or not you're making the best decisions for your long-term health. It's like smoking. Don't sit there coughing your lungs up while you're puffing away and say that everything's okay, because it's not. Quite a few years ago, I had a blood test come back telling me that my liver function was off, and the doctor cautioned me that I was actually on the verge of liver damage if I kept drinking excessively. So I quit drinking for 3 whole months, and it reversed the issue, which was fantastic. But then I went straight back to drinking like it was some kind of Olympic sport once the threat was over, because I hadn't actually confronted the reality of just how out of balance my drinking was. There are times in life for some of us when we need to realize that some stuff is just not good for us and that we need to stop it if we want to have the greatest chance at good physical, mental, and spiritual health. Diet and exercise is another big one. Doing no exercise at all and eating whatever you like is bad for you, and we know that. And so is over-exercising or taking specific eating approaches way too far, like under-eating or being so restrictive that you're missing out on essential nutrients that your body needs to function. Anything that you take too far is going to be bad for you in the long run, whether physically or mentally or even just for the sake of your self-esteem. When I talk about this stuff, as always, it's no judgment. You do what you want. But I always talk about you do what you want, as long as it doesn't harm anyone, and that includes yourself. And all that stuff, all of those types of behaviors, drugs, alcohol, food, excessive shopping, random hookups, not exercising or over-exercising, criticizing other people online, none of that will ever help you to achieve balance because it can't. It's excessive behavior, and too much of anything is not good for you. In fact, I'm not even going to sugarcoat that fact for you at all. Too much of anything is bad for you. End of sentence. Life is balance. Life is good and bad, light and dark, happiness and sadness. And it's up to each of us to find our own sense of balance in order to live a life that causes the least amount of harm to ourselves and to others. If you think you might be out of balance, then you just might be. And since you can't change what has happened in the past, all you can do is focus on your life now and begin to bring about more balance in your life. Which brings me to, how do you create more balance in your life? I think that the first and most important thing to do is to really consider your priorities in life. I talked about priorities in episode 3 of Let's Talk About Mental Health, and I firmly believe that we all need to be crystal clear on what matters the most in our lives, and then put those things first and work outwards from there. So, what really matters to you? Partner, children, pets, immediate family, extended family, friends, physical health, mental health, spirituality, community. These are the things that a lot of people tend to talk about when they're challenged to be very clear on their priorities. But of course, your list is going to be specific to you. So think about what your priorities are. Really consider that carefully. If you're after guidance on getting into the detail on that, have a listen to episode 3. Next, define what balance means to you. What does it mean to you? If you think about the notion of balance in the context of good mental health and well-being, you can start to build a really clear picture of what it means in every area of your life. Only you can define what balance means to you. Having said that, it's about incorporating things that are in your best interests and do the least harm to yourself and other people. So don't be telling me that drinking 16 bottles of wine a week is your definition of balance, because let's be honest, that's not balance, that's alcoholism. So be brutally honest with yourself. Now, once you clearly understand what balance means to you, take a look at your life as it is now and ask yourself, where are there imbalances? This is again where you need to be brutally honest with yourself. We can sometimes tend to shrug things off or downplay just how out of balance we might be in certain areas of our life. And that's human nature, and it's because we're trying to protect ourselves. Or, even more likely, it's because we just don't want to change, because change is hard. If you know deep down inside that you're feeling out of balance, it's time to confront that cold, hard fact. At this point, it's not about judging yourself, it's about self-awareness. Now consider, what can you do to correct any imbalances in your life? Again, only you can identify what's going to work for you. And I'm pretty sure that you don't need me to point out that if you're overworking, then you need to get your work-life balance in order. Just like you don't need me to tell you that if you're partying nonstop, then you probably need to get your shit together. What it all boils down to is this. What is more important to you, having a blast or improving and maintaining your mental health and well-being? Because there comes a point where you can't have everything, and you need to choose between one or the other. Finally, it's up to you to do the work to address areas of imbalance in your life. If you need help to do that, then get help. But accept the fact that nobody can do it for you. It's up to you to do it, and that takes willpower and effort and hard work. But if it's important to you, then you can make it happen, and you will make it happen. Giving up the things that throw us out of balance is a monumental challenge, and it's often not just something that's easy to do once and be done with it. It takes time and daily effort, and you might take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or you might take 1 step forward and 3 steps backwards. But ultimately, it's about making a clear decision to change because you know that the things throwing you out of balance are doing you damage in the long run. It's very rare for anyone to be able to just snap their fingers and be done with whatever it is that's causing damage or that's throwing them out of balance. Instead, you need to break things down into smaller steps and take it one day at a time. I used to smoke, and when I first quit smoking back in 2013, I didn't think about it as quitting so much as I thought about it from the perspective of getting through each day without a cigarette, until eventually it was just the new normal in my life. Life doesn't always have to be about sweeping changes. Instead, it can simply be about taking small steps towards your goals. And if it's proving to be a challenge to make changes, then get help because you don't have to go it alone. As you continue onwards, choose to make balance a priority in your life. Balance doesn't just happen. If you want harmony, you have to actively choose harmony. So it's up to you to make decisions every day that incorporate balance into your life. Work and play, rest and responsibilities, friends and family, indoors and outdoors. We all have responsibilities and we all have desires, and finding balance involves doing what you need to do and doing what you want to do in equal measure. We've all got to pay those bills, but nobody said that you had to abandon your general life satisfaction to keep the lights on, so take steps every day to create more balance in your life. A few general tips that I'd like to give you around balance. First, consistency is important, but it's not just about repetition. So balance the notion of creating consistency in your life with trying new things. That way, it doesn't feel like it's Groundhog Day every single day. Listen to your body and your mind. If you're constantly tired or bored or demotivated, something is out of balance. Be disciplined, but flexible. Don't just set a rigid amount of time every day to do specific tasks and think that you've got everything together on the balance front, because that's not how it works. Discipline means being committed to getting the important things done. It might be submitting that piece of work on time and without a last-minute rush, or paying your bills before they're due. These are all things that are important to keep your life flowing, but you need to have some flexibility around it. So if it's not done by 10 a.m., it's probably not going to be the end of the world, as long as it gets done on the day that it needs to be done. That last-minute rush thing, when I was studying at uni a couple of years ago, and in fact I'm just about to go into some postgraduate studies around positive psychology, one of the things that I'm determined to avoid happening this time is in my last degree, I was notorious for writing papers 24 hours before they were due. And part of it was because of the anxiety, because I was so overwhelmed by everything. I just couldn't bring myself to function with it. And unfortunately, though, what happened was by leaving everything to the last minute, I ended up making it even worse than it needed to be. So it's about finding that balance. It's about being able to say to yourself, I get that I'm not in the headspace to do this right now. However, this little bit of work here, these small steps, these small actions towards what I need to achieve, if I can do that now, if I can do that with some flexibility balanced with discipline, I'm going to make life a little bit easier for myself in the long run. That's a whole other subject, procrastination. I'll have to deal with that one at some point in the future. And that sounds like procrastination because I've just put it off till the future. But we'll deal with that later. Okay, back to my general tips. Practice self-care regularly. It's a really important piece around keeping yourself in balance, and I covered the notion of self-care in episode 6. So if you'd like details on how to approach that, have a listen to or read that episode at the website, letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au. One of the balance things that I think keeps coming up in today's podcast is around all of these things that sort of tie into having fun, drinking or whatever that a lot of us tend to do when we're out with friends or having a bit of fun and whatever. And what I suggest to you is have fun, but have sensible fun. I mean, I know it sounds a bit boring, but is it really? I mean, what's more important, wiping yourself out or feeling like a human being, especially the morning after the night before? Anyway, I'd also suggest say no more often, or if you're not prone to saying yes, then say yes more often, depending on what you need for more balance in your life. Sometimes we can take on too much, and other times we can take on too little. Life doesn't just happen by accident. If you just sit at home in your room or staring at the television, life's not going to happen. So get out and do things, but also be comfortable with saying no when you need time for yourself. And finally, and I say this one about 50,000 times a week, take things one day at a time. You're not going to make sustainable changes overnight. Make incremental changes every day, and slowly but surely, you'll see bigger changes emerge in your life. Keep the notion of balance front of mind in everything that you do, say, and think, and you will be more inclined to make it a priority. So that's it for this episode. To wrap up this week, here are a few points to consider. Number 1. Balance is a choice that you make, one that involves making life decisions that don't harm yourself or others. Number 2. If you want to improve and maintain good mental health and well-being, you need to find balance in all things. Balance is steady, sure, and moderate, and it avoids excess of any kind. And number 3. Creating balance is a choice, and it doesn't have to involve sweeping changes overnight. Simply take the time to set your priorities in order and then make small decisions every day that align with those priorities and improve your sense of balance. As always, I'm going to close out with a quote that I'd like to encourage you to reflect on and consider what it means for you. This quote is from Albert Einstein, and it is, "Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving." Let me repeat that. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. Alright, so, to summarize, balance is a choice that we make to approach life with a sense of moderation, because extremes and excess can lead to extreme consequences. I'm certainly not saying that you shouldn't have fun every now and then, but know the difference between moderation and excess, so that you can make changes if things are getting out of control. Because having a healthy balance in your life will serve to create more consistency, which in turn serves to improve and maintain your mental health and well-being. Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope it gave you some useful, practical advice on the subject of balance and mental health. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. Reviews are important because they help other people to find the show. Next week's episode will be loneliness. I'll be talking about the negative effects that loneliness can have on your mental health and well-being, and different things that you can do to improve it. I hope you'll join me for that episode, which will be released on Monday morning Australian time. On Friday, I'll be sending out the next issue of the Mental Health Talk newsletter, which is a weekly roundup of articles and resources that are focused on good mental health and well-being. You can find that and past episodes of Let's Talk About Mental Health at the website, which is letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au. That's letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au. And you can also sign up there to have new posts delivered to your inbox. Find Let's Talk About Mental Health on social media. I post additional content daily on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at LTAMHofficial. That's LTAMHofficial. Have an absolutely fantastic week. Look after yourself and make a conscious effort to put kindness out into the world, because what you put out comes back to you. Take care and talk to you next time.